turn now to Republican National Committee Chair Ronna McDaniel. She joins us from Charlotte. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Great to be with you.
I know you're quite busy. The RNC nomination formally of President Trump is scheduled for tomorrow. Will he be in Charlotte at all? Can you tell us anything about what to expect?
Well, he will be in North Carolina, unlike Joe Biden, who didn't go to Wisconsin, the state where he held his convention. The president has an event planned in Asheville. He hasn't confirmed if he's going to come by Charlotte yet, but we have the delegates here.
The AP is reporting that the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, will be addressing the forum from Israel, where he's on official business. This line up when you start hearing about cabinet members being involved. I mean, first of all, it's very unusual for a diplomat to get involved in domestic politics, but this starts to look like using taxpayer-funded federal resources for a campaign. Will taxpayers be reimbursed?
I can only tell you, Margaret, that the events that we've put forward from the RNC and the campaign are going to be paid for by the convention of the RNC and the campaign. You know, everything that we've put together has changed because of COVID. The president rightly said we're going to leave Jacksonville because we don't want to have resources taken away from a city that's dealing with a pandemic. And he brought it back to the White House, which is his residence. Yeah. And it's being paid for by the Republican National Committee and the campaign, not the taxpayers.
So you are confirming that Pompeo's trip will be reimbursed by the campaign?
I'm not confirming anything having to do with Secretary Pompeo's trip. I am just saying the programming, the staging, everything that we're doing will be paid for by the Republican National Committee and the campaign.
You will have, as you said, some in-person activity there in Charlotte. I heard you'd have something like 300 people gathering there for official business. How are you going to protect them all from COVID? This is a mass gathering.
You know, Margaret, I think it's really important to understand that the Democrats and Joe Biden just said, we're going to shut this country down again. And that is a really elite view of America right now. Now, from a safety perspective, we tested everybody before they came to Charlotte. We have been testing people on site. We are doing the things that are allowing people to live their lives, have a convention, and do it in a healthy and safe way, which most Americans are doing going back to work, as they're going to the grocery store, as they're going to hospitals. This is a realistic way of opening up our country and doing it in a healthy and safe way. And the Democrats are saying, shut it all down. Well, that's easy for Hollywood celebrities and privileged politicians, but that's not good for average Americans.
I want to ask you about the election itself. The president has said he expects this to be one of the most fraudulent, if not the most fraudulent in history. He's against mail-in ballots, but the Republican Party in Iowa has mailed absentee ballots to voters. Politico is reporting Pennsylvania, the GOP website is promoting vote by mail. Similar situation in Ohio. Why is the Republican Party promoting something that the president says he's against?
I'm so glad you asked me this question, because there is a very real difference between states that have tried and true absentee processes that have been in place and have been tested and work, versus states like Nevada that 90 days out from an election have completely upended their entire election protocol and put chaos into their process because they haven't tested it and it isn't certain.
But the post office said this week that they can handle the mail volume.
It's not about just the post office, Margaret. It's that they're sending ballots to unverified voter rolls. I just talked to a voter this week who said she's received 3 ballots for a different woman at her address, a person that's never lived there.
A ballot or an application for a ballot?
An actual ballot. An actual ballot. She was in California. In Nevada and California, they aren't sending absentee request forms. They're sending live ballots, which I think is a huge problem.
Getting an absentee request form. The Republican Party in these states is promoting mail-in voting. Is the Republican Party supportive of that?
We are promoting people embracing the absentee processes that have been put in place that are tried and true. And we are suing states that are trying to change their process 90 days out from an election, which is adding chaos to an election where we should have certainty.
I want to ask you about some of our data that we just got. CBS News has a battleground tracker out, and it's showing a big divide between how Republicans view the U.S. response to the coronavirus and how the majority of voters see it. 73% of Republicans say it's going well. 38% of all voters say it's going well by comparison. Then 57% of Republicans say the number of dead is acceptable at 170,000 people. 33% of independents say it's acceptable, just 10% of Democrats. How could that number be acceptable, and why is there such a big divide between how Republicans see it and how the majority of people do?
Well, I think that is a really unfair poll, and of course, there is nobody in this country, there is nobody, starting with the President of the United States, who wants to see people pass away from this global pandemic that came here from China, not being honest, from the WHO failing in their one duty to identify a pandemic, and they failed the global community. But let's be honest, Republicans do not want to see people suffering from this pandemic. We have all been affected by this. This is not a Republican or Democrat issue.
So you say that number is acceptable?
No, of course not, Margaret. This is a global pandemic. Nobody wants to see somebody die from this. I have had friends die from this. This is not something people want, but the president's response has saved lives by shutting down travel early, which Joe Biden called xenophobic, by doing the decisive actions he did early.
From China, but not Europe.
Lives. But did it from Europe as well. But Joe
not
Biden
until
didn't,
March.
But Joe Biden didn't support that. You didn't hear him come out and say we should shut down travel from Europe. You didn't hear Democrats saying that. They have opposed this president every step of the way in a time of crisis when we should be coming together as Americans. This should not be politicized.
One area where Republicans also differ from voters overall is on the Black Lives Matter movement. Most voters nationwide agree with the ideas of it, while most Republicans, 2/3 of them, strongly disagree. 8 in 10 Republicans think there has been too much attention on the issue of discrimination. Doesn't this type of thinking hurt Republicans' chances of making gains with black voters?
Well, I think that there's a big distinction between the words Black Lives Matter and the movement, which has been led by people who embrace Marxism, who have said on networks, we want to burn this country down. And I think you have to separate that, because as we are seeing in the name of Black Lives Matter, these riots and these looters who really aren't affiliated with any type of peaceful protest. We all condemn what happened to George Floyd. Republicans and Democrats alike recognize that.
So you don't think there has been too much attention on the issue of discrimination? That was 8 in 10 Republicans said too much attention on that issue, not the movement, but the issue.
You know who's given more attention to discrimination than anybody? This president. He's the one who passed the First Steps Act to get rid of the injustices in our criminal justice reform. This is our president who's pardoned people who were unjustly charged with crimes and sentenced to lengthy sentences disproportionately affecting the black community. This is the president who gave more loans to HBCUs. This is the president that created economic opportunity zones. This is the president who has tackled discrimination, and he's going to continue to do so, and you're going to hear more about that next week in our convention as he talks about the policies he's put forward and how they have improved the lives of everyday Americans.
Ronna McDaniel, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Margaret.